All right, welcome back to the Assassinations Investigations Audit. And we're going to switch over um, to the RFK assassination and just kind of go through systematically. I kind of listed it out here: Wikipedia articles, FBI documents, videos, news articles, books, and kind of a general Google search and then timeline. So we'll spend about 13 minutes on each area. And actually, no, let's make that 15 minutes in each area, and then, we'll just keep pushing forward and find out what we can find. There's just a lot of information, and I've kind of went over the generalities of what happened, and now we're going to get into kind of the meat. Mostly we're looking for documents and evidence, but there's not a lot there. One thing right off the top here I noticed is that Robert Kennedy would have been 99 years old. Because it's now, 2024, so he'd be 99, almost 100 years old. It's hard to believe that someone who died seemingly so young, he was, 43, with such a youthful face, could have been, if he had lived, 100 years old by now. But, we've got his son running around to remind us all what he looked like, and unfortunately his son is a total wacko, brainworm, conspiracy nut who's going to be in the Trump administration and put in charge of the Health and Human Services and crap like that, which is a total farce. And he's a total, he's against fluoridation of the water, which has been proven time and time and again to be safe and to help improve dental health. He's against vaccinations, which time and again have been proven safe. Matter of fact, Robert Kennedy is alive today because of vaccinations. Robert Kennedy Jr. is alive today because of vaccinations. That's a fact. The majority, probably 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20, 2 out of 10 of his generation would have been dead or severely handicapped if it wasn't for vaccinations. So now he's going to basically play philosophical ideology with your grandchildren and your children's lives. Anyway, back onto the Robert Kennedy assassination. So it says, Robert Kennedy, born November 20th, 1925, died June 6, 1968, also known as RFK, was an American politician and lawyer. He served as the 64th United States Attorney General from January 1961 to September 1964, and as U.S. Senator from New York from January 1965 until his assassination in 1968. When he was running for Democratic presidential nomination, like his brother John F. Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, he was a prominent member of the Democratic Party and considered an icon of modern American liberalism. Born to the prominent Kennedy family in Brookline, Massachusetts, Kennedy attended Harvard University and later received his law degree from University of Virginia. He began his career as a correspondent for the Boston Globe and as a lawyer for the Justice Department, but later resigned to manage his brother's successful campaign for the U.S. Senate in 1952. The following year, Kennedy worked as an assistant counsel to the Senate committee chaired by Senator Joseph McCarthy. He gained national attention as the chief counsel for Senate Labor Rackets Committee in 1957 and 1959, where he publicly challenged Teamsters President Jimmy Hoffa. And see, that's interesting. Hold on one second. See, I always try to figure out how he's able to be questioning Hoffa in that committee when he wasn't even an elected official, which I find quite interesting. I guess because he was chief counsel. Kennedy resigned from the committee to conduct his brother's successful campaign in 1960 presidential elections. He was appointed U.S. Attorney General at the age of 35, one of the youngest cabinet members in the American history. Kennedy served as John's closest advisor until his latter's assassination in 1963. Another thing a lot of people didn't know is that Robert Kennedy was running. They basically took over the anti-Castro forces and tried to bring them under the control of the United States and the CIA, and also tried to control the CIA and run it. And it was called Operation Mongoose. And it was through Operation Mongoose that the anti-Castro forces, the mafia forces, the CIA and military forces were able to turn their guns from pointing them at Castro and turned them on Kennedy. So that was one reason why he probably didn't investigate, besides the Warren Commission, as vigorously as he would have for his brother's death, because he realized that the people who were probably behind the assassination were the same people that he had put together to assassinate Castro. And all they did is just turn their guns around and pointed them at his brother. Kennedy's tenure is known for advocating for the civil rights movement, the fight against organized crime, the involvement in U.S. policy related to Cuba. He authored his account of the Cuban Missile Crisis in the book 13 Days. As Attorney General, Kennedy authorized the Federal Bureau of Investigation to wiretap Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference on a limited basis. See, that's just fucking ridiculous. The reason that he did that, they say, is because Hoover was obsessed with communists and was obsessed with Martin Luther King because he was black, and was convinced, or at least advocated, that there were communists manipulating the civil rights movement, and it was being run by Moscow. And so this is why Kennedy authorized the wiretapping, was to find out if there was any connections of what that was. Anyway, it says, after his brother's assassination, he remained in office during the presidency of Lyndon Johnson for several months. He left to run for the U.S. Senate from New York in 1964 and defeated Republican incumbent Kenneth Keating, overcoming criticism that he was a carpetbagger from Massachusetts. In office, Kennedy opposed U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War and raised awareness of poverty by sponsoring legislation designated to lure private business to blighted communities. The Bedford Stuyvesant Restoration Project. He was an advocate for issues related to human rights and social justice by traveling abroad to Eastern Europe, Latin America, and South Africa, and formed working relationships with Martin Luther King, Cesar Chavez, and Walter Reuther. Now, who is that? Oh, the Automobile Association. Okay. In 1968, Kennedy became a leading candidate for the Democratic nomination for the presidency by appealing to poor African Americans, Hispanic, Catholic, and younger voters. Now, you remember how that all worked out, okay? So you got Johnson's in office. There's the Tet Offensive. The Tet Offensive basically, all along for 4 years, the Johnson and the government telling the American people, we're winning the war in Vietnam. The victory is right around the corner. And then the Tet Offensive occurs in February, March of 1968. And it proves, even though we won the Tet Offensive, it proves that the Vietnamese were not going to be defeated, and that the war was far from over. And I guess with that, plus the guilt of knowing about and being a cover-up person for the assassination of JFK, Johnson just couldn't take it and decided to resign. And then 4 days after he resigns, the military industrial complex takes out Martin Luther King because he'd come out against the Vietnam War. And then the door was clear for RFK to enter, the race in April of 1968. So only 2 months later, he's assassinated. Okay? So it says, shortly after winning, his main challenger in the race was Senator Eugene McCarthy. Shortly after winning the California primary around midnight on June 5th, 1968, Kennedy was shot by Sirhan Sirhan. That would be June 6, actually. Midnight, June 6. A 24-year-old Palestinian alleged in retaliation for his support of Israel following the 1967 Six-Day War. Kennedy died 25 years later. Sirhan was arrested, tried, and convicted through the assassination. Like his brothers, continued to subject widespread analysis and numerous conspiracy theories. So, again, very interesting. We're going to get into all that. So it says, Robert Francis Kennedy, born outside of Boston in Brookline, Massachusetts. I never could figure out why he never ran for senator or congressperson there. But anyway, on November 20th, 1925, to Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. So that would have made him, what, in 1941, 1941 minus 1925. He was only 16. So 17, 18. Yeah, he would have been 18 in 1943. So he still could have been drafted. But I don't think he served at all, did he? No. Somehow he was able to get out of the draft. Anyway, he was the seventh of 9 children. Robert described his position in his family hierarchy by saying, when you come that far down, you have to struggle to survive. His parents were members of the 2 prominent Irish-American families that were active in Massachusetts Democratic Party. All 4 Kennedy grandparents were children of Irish immigrants. His 8 siblings were Joseph Jr., John, Rosemary, Kathleen, Eunice, Patricia, Jean, and Ted. So Joseph Jr. was killed in a bombing raid in Germany. It was like a plane loaded full of explosives, and they pointed at a target, and then he would jump out and parachute, but apparently it blew up before that happened. So he was the first in line that should have been president, but he got killed. Then John, he becomes president, but then he's assassinated. There's Rosemary, Kathleen, Eunice, Patricia, Jean, and then there's Ted. And of course, I think Ted ran in 1980 or something like that against Carter. Starting from solidly middle-class family in Boston, his father amassed a fortune and established trust funds for his 9 children that guaranteed lifelong financial security. So there's a lot of people out there that say that Joseph Kennedy got rich running booze from Canada or the Bahamas during the Depression or during Prohibition, and that's not true. He actually, from what I understand, was a financial advisor or a stockbroker of some kind, and they also heavily invested in Hollywood, which was emerging at that time. And that's how he got his wealth. He didn't get it from running booze and shit like that. Now, the mafia, they like to say crap stories like that, just like they'd like to say that, Robert Kennedy was fucking Marilyn Monroe and things like that. But, what a bunch of crap. Oh, look, here, it does say he did serve in the military. United States Naval Reserve, 1944 to 1946. I think he was like in the ROTC program in college, and then the war ended before he finished. All right, let's see. We're almost done with our 15 minutes here. Okay. During Robert's childhood, his father dubbed him the runt of the family and wrote him off. Focusing great attention on his two eldest brothers, Joseph and John, his parents involved their children in discussions of history and current affairs at the family dinner table. I can hardly remember a mealtime, Kennedy reflected, when the conversation was not dominated by what Franklin Delano Roosevelt was doing or what was happening in the world. Since public affairs had dominated so much of our actions and discussions, public life seemed really an extension of the family life. So that's the thing. When you're rich like that, you can afford to enter into politics and do all these other things. So you don't have to worry about, paying the electric bill, paying the rent, paying the mortgage, shit like that. Like the rest of us working stiffs, okay? We'll get into this later, but eventually his father gets appointed as ambassador by Franklin Roosevelt to England. And while he's there, it's kind of interesting, an Irish Catholic being the ambassador to England. Anyway, while he was there, the Kennedys were fiercely anti-communist and would praise Hitler openly because of his stance against Stalin and the communists. And that's what a lot of people were doing at the time, is they were praising Hitler as a bulwark, like Lindbergh. And people forget that the Kennedys were praising Hitler. Joseph Kennedy was. And against the Stalinist, communist takeover, and also, the civil war that's going on in Spain, which you had basically the forces of communism fighting against the forces of fascism, okay? And so he put his support behind, Hitler. All right, so we're going to stop there and move on to the next section. All right, so the next section is going to be the FBI vault. And if you've never gone to this thing, it's great. I love the FBI vault. I do a lot of research there. Almost any topic that I'm doing a video on or researching, I'm always going to the vault just to see what the FBI has. It may not be exactly what I'm looking for, but it's always interesting to see what the FBI has on certain topics. But you have to use the FBI vault with a measure of, discernment. Because I'm not saying the FBI lies, but the FBI is a human organization full of human beings, and they get it wrong sometimes. I do these videos on the Atlanta child murders, and just yesterday, I was reading an FBI document that clearly stated twice that the FBI was mentioning how the furniture had been moved around in Wayne Williams' house between when they went back on the 3rd of June to execute a warrant. And they were saying how different it looked than when they went in and did a search, a voluntary allowed search, on the 22nd of May. And I knew that couldn't be correct because I knew it was like the 29th of May, because Wayne Williams was stopped that morning of the 22nd of May. He was let go. They never went in, the FBI never went in his house on the 22nd of May. They had no reason to, because there wasn't even a body found of Nathaniel Cater until the 24th of May floating in the river. Okay? So he may have been a suspect, but there's no way they went in there and searched his property. Okay? On the 22nd of May. It was the 29th of May. Okay? When they asked Homer Williams, Wayne Williams' father, if they could voluntarily, if he would let them voluntarily search the house. And so they got it wrong. Whoever was typing up that memo had the date wrong. There's some more. And sometimes, the FBI acts like a stenographer. They take down whatever someone says to them. Doesn't mean it's real or it's true, but they're taking it down with no commentary. Like, there's a whole series you can look in the vault and find out about sightings that people went to the FBI and talked to them about they had heard or they had seen Hitler after May or April 30th of 1945 in South America, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, all these places. Doesn't mean it's real. Doesn't mean it actually was Hitler. But they investigated the information anyway, just to be sure. Because, life is not full of clarity. Like in the movies. Oh, it's obvious this is the bad guy. It's obvious they did that or did this. Life is full of ambiguity and gray areas. We don't know every and anything 100% of the time. Okay? That's because that's just the way shit is. And even if someone is convicted of doing something and they go to prison, doesn't mean that's 100% guarantee that that person committed that crime. I mean, how many people have they exonerated with DNA evidence? So it's just your best guess with the evidence you have at the time. And it's the same thing with the FBI. So this is why the FBI, they take down everything because they don't know what's going to be relevant later on. Okay? So, anyway, I'm just saying, when you read these documents, they're a great source of information, but you always have to, in the back of your mind, keep it in perspective with other evidence that you find. And also, least the third but most least thing, there's going to be political biases. I don't care who they are. The FBI is usually rightward leaning, especially in the 40s, 50s, and 60s with Hoover. So you're going to have this bias, okay, toward what you read. And that's going to come through in those memos. So anyway, so let's take a look at these memos. So I entered Robert Kennedy, and there's a whole huge section here. A bunch of documents, about 39 pages full. Okay? But not all of it has to do with the Robert Kennedy assassination. So we're going to look at this section of the Robert Kennedy assassination. There's 14 sets of documents. Each set is going to have probably 90, 100 pages. So we'll open this one up. We'll just systematically go from left to right, front to back, top to bottom. And we'll take a look at these documents. Now, if you go in these documents, you can go down to the bottom here to the PDF. You right-click on it, hit open in a new tab, and it'll come up. And then you can download it, and it'll come up where you can take a look at it. There you go. So, and another thing too is that I know for a fact that even though the FBI says that it includes all the documents that it has, they're lying. It's not true. Most of these documents are inter-office or between offices, like, say, the field office in Las Vegas of the FBI, sending a memo to the headquarters in Washington, D.C. to let them know, mostly a summary about their investigation that they're conducting. But they don't include handwritten memos, telephone conversations. I mean, there's a whole list of telephone conversations that Hoover would call and say, don't put this in a memo, but I want you to do this, I want you to do that, send so-and-so to here and so-and-so to there, that you'll never read about, okay? And also, a lot of these documents were created in the 40s and 50s and 60s before there was the Freedom of Information Act. So you'll read some information that they never intended for anyone else to find or read, especially the public. And also, whether they say it or not, they have shredders and burn bags at the FBI and the CIA for a reason. They're not taking all the documents and putting them in files, and then later when people retire, they're giving them over to the National Archives, and they're giving them up for disclosure in the Freedom of Information request. That's just bullshit. If you think you're reading everything, all the documents, you're imagining shit. Again, they don't have shredders and burn bags in the FBI and the CIA just for decoration. They use them, folks. And then, any information that's going to the National Archives, they've got somebody scanning through and looking through all these documents. Okay? And the number one rule is, cover your ass. Protect the Bureau at all costs. Anything that embarrasses the Bureau or makes it illegal, they could get sued over, you're never going to see that shit. Okay? Never. And of course, what you don't know, you can't request. You see what I'm saying? So if you don't know a document exists, you can't order it. You can't say, hey, I'd like to see all the documents of this investigation. And they may give you half of the documents. And then maybe half of those documents, or all those documents, half of the stuff has been redacted. Okay? So number one rule is protect the Bureau's ass. All right, so let's get in and see what we have here. We got about 5 minutes. I've been ranting here. All right. You can see this was put together back in 1977. That's what that number means. And of course, another thing they do is they make blurred copies, shitty copies, tiny, small copies that's hard to read. And that's just another way of making it difficult to find the truth. So it says Department of Justice. And what is this? September something, 1961. Or it could be September something, 1951. Who knows? It says Robert Kennedy. This is probably an internal investigation of Robert Kennedy because he was on that Joseph McCarthy committee. You see, he's got his basic information, his address. He's married. Here's his education. You see right there. Assertion is admitted to, okay, something admitted to the bar. Employee United States Navy. This could be a background check that he had to fill out. Personal references, John Kennedy. That's his brother, of course. Boston, 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 Boston. Here's William McCarthy, Federal District Court. So, that's who he, when you're a law, you know, a lot of times you'll clerk under a judge, and that's what he was doing there. Yeah, so this is like 1952. Communications section. Coes, Robert Francis Kennedy, attorney, criminal division, address. They're going over all this information. So they're probably doing a federal background check on him. let's see, references. Looks like they've taken this information and put it into a memo to send out to these various offices here. Boston, Richmond, New York, Washington field office. Military service. So the FBI is going to take that information. They're going to go to Boston and check out where he went to school. They're going to go to Richmond, check out where he got his law license. I think he clerked in New York. And they're going to check out his military record. Yeah. A lot of this stuff can be boring, but you have to read through everything because then you find the subtleties. So this just basically looks like a federal background check of the FBI on him. They're checking him out. You see he's an applicant attorney for the criminal divisions of the Department of Justice. So they're doing a background check on him. What all this paperwork means, that's what that means there. Nothing derogatory. See, they went to Richmond and they looked at his Navy files, or Norfolk. They sent out someone from Richmond to Norfolk and checked out his Navy files. Nothing derogatory was mentioned in the applicant's file. And see, this is what gets me is that, they do through all this background information for any federal employee, and he's not even applying for a top secret clearance, just for a job at the Attorney General. And they do all this background information, and if any of these people had any derogatory information, they would have been declined for employment. But yet, you got people like Donald Trump, who's been convicted, 34 times of felonies, was found guilty of sexual assault in a civil lawsuit. He tried to disrupt the election. He stole classified documents, but yet he's allowed to be president again, and run for president and vote, where most people that even had one felony wouldn't even be allowed to vote, much less run for a fucking public office. And then he's going to be able to handle classified documents when everybody knows that if you had one felony, you never would be allowed anywhere near a classified top secret document. Which is such a farce. Which makes our political system such a joke. Anyway, so we're on page 7. I guess that's page 8. And we will pick that up later on. Alright, so we're just going to systematically go through all these videos. And I don't know what's on these, but we're going to run through them and see what we can find here.
Hotel, Los Angeles. On June 5th, 1968, headquarters for the Robert Kennedy campaign. Victorious in the crucial Kennedy addresses an enthusiastic crowd in one of the hotel's ballrooms.
My thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there.
As he turned and went by me, he turned to the right toward the kitchen.
When he did come through, lots of television cameras and stuff, and we were going into a press conference.
He was shaking hands with the two busboys, talking with them, and it was at that time that the shots started.
Major D reported that Senator Kennedy had been shot.
He's been shot?
That's right.
I just heard this crackling noise and was shaking violently, and I thought I was being electrocuted. That was my impression.
Senator Kennedy has been shot. Is that possible? Is that possible?
I saw him laying on the ground. I knew that he wasn't going to live.
Everybody else off. Just please stay back. Just a doctor. Come right here.
25 and a half hours after he is shot at 1:44 a.m. on June 6, Robert Kennedy dies. Immediately following the shooting, there is little doubt in anyone's mind that 24-year-old Sirhan B. Sirhan, using an 8-shot, .22 caliber revolver, was the one who killed Kennedy and wounded 5 others. There were 77 people in the pantry that night, witnesses. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. An open and shut case. Or was it? Greg Stone has spent over a decade looking into the Kennedy assassination. He is one of a number calling for a reinvestigation of the case. A call based on seeming inconsistencies in the physical evidence and on a belief that the original investigation is flawed. A belief that is remarkably shared by former LAPD Sergeant Paul Sharaga.
So let's back up here. So you see this picture, okay? And this is an artist's sketch of supposedly what happened, but it's literally impossible that this is what happened, okay? Because Sirhan was nowhere near, because the autopsy says that the shot was fired no more than 2 inches from a upward angle below and behind the right ear, which would have been right there. But when you look in the video, you see Kennedy's facing this way. There's a man right here, the security guard. Kennedy is shaking hands with this person, but he doesn't turn his entire body that way. And they've got Sirhan standing up here, but he wasn't there at all. He was over here by the pantry. Excuse me, there was a prep table right here. So he's over on the prep table. Nowhere near, about 3 feet away from where Robert Kennedy's at. So it's just impossible.
Investigation is flawed. A belief that is remarkably shared by former LAPD Sergeant Paul Sharaga, the first police officer on the scene the night of the shooting. When asked if he thinks there has been a cover-up inside the LAPD,
I would have to come to that conclusion.
If there is a cover-up, the question is why? To hide a conspiracy or to conceal slipshod police work? Who really shot Bobby? A much simpler question 20 years ago.
And I don't think we have to accept the idea that the stain of bloodshed is going to be ever across our country.
All right, that's one video. And we'll back up here. I'm just going to make comments as they come along here. Let's see. I don't think that's about the assassination. This looks like a talk show. RFK Jr. See, so RFK Jr., I do agree with him on this point, even though the guy is a lunatic.
Donald Trump's pick to lead the Department of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., pushing for answers on the 1960 assassination of President John F. Kennedy, his uncle. RFK has long believed the CIA was involved. News Nation's correspondent Nancy Liu has the latest.
RFK Jr. has long suspected the CIA had some kind of role in the assassination of his uncle, and now he has a powerful ally in the push for answers. With RFK Jr. poised to play a key role in the Trump administration, currently tapped as health secretary.
So he's misguided, okay? I believe that, or the evidence points to the fact that there were people, either former or current CIA employees on the payroll, and CIA contractors, mercenaries, people that the CIA was paying to assassinate Castro in the mafia and in the military, things like that. But I don't believe that the assassination was from the top down at the CIA. A CIA top-down, contrived conspiracy. They're elements of the CIA, the military, intelligence, the right wing, the anti-Castro Cubans, racist cops and racist right-wing conservative Birch Society type people. That's where the conspiracy lies right there, okay? And that same group of people also killed Martin Luther King and eventually RFK Jr., RFK. I don't think that any institution, the military didn't kill JFK. The CIA didn't kill JFK, okay? There were right-wing elements inside that group, okay, that was involved in the killing of JFK. Now, if you look at the case of Olof Palmer, whatever, the former Prime Minister of Sweden, he was assassinated. The guy who they found that killed him was kind of a gun for hire. But the plot originated in the right-wing elements inside the intelligence community and the military in Sweden. Not that the entire Swedish military or intelligence community was involved in the killing of the Prime Minister, but right-wing elements were involved, and they were using, okay, just like in the JFK assassination, these right-wing elements are using their positions and using assets of the CIA and the military to carry out the assassinations. And they did the same thing with Martin Luther King. They had units of Army intelligence that were following Martin Luther King around. The FBI was tapping his phones and following him around. Same thing with RFK. He presented a threat to the military-industrial complex, the people that were making money in Vietnam, the people that were, afraid of the communist takeover in the U.S. They looked in the streets and there were hippies and drugs everywhere and protests and people were surrounding the Pentagon. So they struck back. They struck first at any kind of establishment candidate, okay, that they thought of as a threat. And that's why RFK and also MLK were assassinated. But maybe some good will come out of Trump. When Trump was in office, he released some of the information, but not all the documents, because the CIA came to him, and I'm sure they laid out, photos of Trump with little 15, 16-year-old girls at, at that island in the Bahamas. What was that? At Epstein's Island. I'm sure they laid out photos, because that's what Epstein was doing. He was a mercenary, a blackmail mercenary, selling whoever he could blackmail information to the highest bidders, with the CIA, the Mossad, MI6, Russian, Chinese intelligence. It didn't matter. He was going to make his money, okay? And so whether Trump goes through with this, and like I said, any documents that prove, a smoking gun back to the agency or anything have long been destroyed. Like I said, they don't have burn bags and shredders in the CIA and the FBI for no reason. Okay? So, good luck, RFK, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Let's just move on to another video here. Hold on.
I've heard you talk about this
all right, it's spinning.
Recently, and we don't.
Also, RFK believes that the security guard shot RFK Sr. in the back of the head, and that Sirhan was just a distraction, which I go along with, because the guy who's the security guard is extreme right-wing guy. He voted for, what, McGovern or something like that. And he had the same type of revolver that Sirhan did. He lied about selling it a month or two before the assassination. He actually didn't sell it until after the assassination. And then he ran off to the Philippines shortly after the assassination. And he was still living there up until recently. And RFK went to the Philippines and offered him something like $500,000 to tell his story. And then I think the guy mysteriously died shortly before that. But let's listen to this one. Interview.
On May 26, 1968, your father made a statement that we must defend Israel against aggression from wherever source. Our obligations to Israel, unlike our obligation towards other countries, are clear and imperative. The U.S. should without delay sell Israel 50 Phantom jets. Okay. A day later, Kennedy's strong plea for the defense of Israel appeared in the Pasadena Independent. The article enraged a Palestinian named Sirhan Sirhan. He wrote in his diary, Robert F. Kennedy must be assassinated before June 5th, which was the first anniversary of the 67 Six-Day War in Israel. The Pasadena Independent was in his pocket when he committed the act. He was killed because of his support for Israel, says Kathleen Kennedy Townsend. That's not the case? That's not the truth?
Well, you know, he was, Sirhan was involved in the murder of my father, but he did not fire the shots that killed my father. Oh, and
but didn't he want to, but according to this, is that wrong that he read this story, was enraged as a Palestinian? I mean, it's the idea that the article was in his pocket when he committed the act. Is that wrong?
Isn't that funny?
That could be right. You know, and I don't speculate as to what happened. All I say is that
when you listen to Sirhan, he says that he was drunk and that I believe he was going to go to some kind of party, and he was too drunk to drive, he said. So he saw this activity at the Ambassador Hotel and figured that'd be a good place to go and sober up. So he went into this bar. This is his story, his words. Eventually we'll come across this. And while he's in the bar, he's drinking coffee. He's not drinking alcohol. He's trying to sober up so he can drive home or drive to this party. And while he's in there, this girl in a blonde girl with a polka dot dress comes in and starts talking with him. And he's thinking, oh, wow, I'm going to get lucky maybe tonight. And so he's following this girl around, and he's looking for coffee. That's all he kept talking about. While he's following this girl around, he's looking for coffee. And he finds this big, shiny coffee urn. He doesn't know it's near the pantry where Kennedy's going to be shot. And so he's looking for a coffee cup to get coffee from this big, shiny coffee urn. And that's the last thing he says he remembers. The next thing he remembers was being choked on the pantry, or in the pantry on the prep table by Rosie Greer. And the girl in the polka-dotted dress was seen by 3 other people. There was this woman that was sitting out on the stairs smoking a cigarette. And she said 2 Hispanic men came out, and this blonde girl in a polka-dotted dress came out saying, we shot him. And she says, who did you shoot? And she says, Kennedy, we shot Kennedy. And then they run down the stairs and they're gone. At the bottom of the stairs, coming around the front, they run into this polka dot woman in the polka dotted dress runs by another couple. And she says the same thing. We shot him, we shot him. They say, who did you shoot? We say, Kennedy. And then they run off. Two separate people see the same woman that Sirhan saw, was the last person to see, and they hear the same thing, that we shot Kennedy. We shot Kennedy. Not Kennedy was shot, but we shot Kennedy. Sometime before that, an African-American male is in the bar also, before Sirhan, and sees this woman with the polka dot dress. He says he did remember her because she had very large bosoms that were hanging out. So you got 4 people saying they saw, or 5 people, if you include Sirhan, saying they saw a woman, a blonde woman with a polka dot dress. Somehow involved in the assassination. And then you've got this security guard. And if you go back, this Hispanic woman sitting on the stairs, there's a whole interview, her name is Serrano, of her being interviewed by a detective with the LAPD, who's literally for 2 hours berating her, saying she's lying, she didn't see that, they didn't say that. And eventually she breaks down and says, I just want to go, I'll tell you whatever you want me to say, just write it down, and I just want to get out of here. And so she recants what she'd been arguing for 2 hours before that she heard. This couple, they told a policeman, that guy Sherrod, policeman you just saw right there, the policeman wrote the report down. He filed the report, and then he was called to his supervisor's office that told him to remove the report. And then when he went in, asked him about the report. And then when he went in to retrieve the report, he said that 2 men from either the FBI or an internal investigation division of the LAPD had come in and removed the report. So it wasn't on public record anymore. Luckily, he said, he had made a copy and has a copy of that report. And then the black man who saw and reported, when he starts hearing these stories about this woman in the polka dotted dress, and he's like, well, I saw the woman in the polka dotted dress, and he tells the police, and they try to shake him down and harass him and tell him that he didn't see that, and that if he keeps lying to them, they're going to arrest him for lying to the police. So he doesn't file a police report with them, but he does do an interview with the news. So I find that interesting. But anyway, we'll move on to the next section here. All right, so this is news articles in no particular order. All right, let's see here. Okay, here's an article about the RFK assassination. It says, LA's night of agony, RFK assassination is long, dark shadow. Now this is an interesting picture because you see there's RFK. He's on the floor, okay? This is a Vietnamese guy or Asian guy that was helping him that worked in the kitchen. See, there's the wall right there. There are people behind him. Over here you can't see is the table where Sirhan was pinned to by Rosie Gere. Now, if you look carefully, You see this tie? RFK has his tie. This tie right here is a clip-on tie, and it belongs to the security guard that is standing right here behind RFK. Okay, and you hear him talk about it. He goes, yeah, I left immediately after Kennedy was assassinated, but I had to go back the next night or the next day and get my tie. I had a clip-on tie that I wore with my uniform, and it had been ripped off, and I couldn't find it. So what happened is he shot Kennedy in the back of the head right here with his revolver, and in the scuffle got his tie ripped off. You see? Hold on one second. All right, so we'll read through some of this article. Looks like it was updated July 16th, 2024. Political violence can cast an oppressively long shadow, as Los Angeles knows only too well. It was here on June 5th, 1968 that Robert Kennedy was assassinated at the Ambassador Hotel after being named the winner of the California presidential primary. The killing was captured on television cameras, which made the horror even worse, and it was replayed over and over. Kennedy's killing sent Los Angeles into a deep mourning for days. The young progressive had been pinged across the city, paying special attention to black and Latino communities that politicians often passed over. For me, the most painful photos were not of the killing itself, but of the somber scenes outside Good Samaritan Hospital, where hundreds converged in the darkness for vigil for RFK that turned into a death watch. The next morning, the crowd swelled into the thousands as his body was taken from the hearse, by hearse from the hospital to the Los Angeles airport. So Kennedy was still alive when he arrived at the hospital, and he died, a couple hours later. Why Robert Kennedy's killing still haunts us. Time marched on. The Grand Ambassador, a Wilshire Boulevard landmark that never got past the notoriety of that night, was torn down to make way for a learning complex in RFK's memory, complete with a Judy Baca memorial. Sirhan Sirhan, who had written the manifesto 3 weeks before, stating that Kennedy must be assassinated on June 5th, 1968. So it's interesting. We just was watching this article, okay, or this interview. Here, let's just go over this again. Hold on one second. Let's back up.
Israel, unlike our obligation towards other...
Yeah.
Okay, this is what I want to ask you about, because I've heard you talk about this recently, and we don't... On May 26, 1968, your father made a statement that we must defend Israel against aggression from wherever source. Our obligations to Israel, unlike our obligation towards other countries, are clear and imperative. The U.S. should without delay sell Israel 50 Phantom jets. Okay. A day later, Kennedy's strong plea for the defense of Israel appeared in the Pasadena Independent. The article enraged a Palestinian named Sirhan Sirhan. He wrote in his diary, Robert F. Kennedy must be assassinated before June 5th, which was the first anniversary of the 67 Six-Day War in Israel. The Pasadena Independent...
So you heard that, right? So it said that Kennedy made a speech on 26 May saying that the U.S. must sell Israel 50 Phantom jets. It appeared in the Pasadena paper on the 27th of May. Yet, it says clearly right here, it says, Sirhan, who had written in a manifesto 3 weeks before stating that Kennedy must be assassinated on June 5th, 1968, was sent to prison. So, my friends, 3 weeks before June 5th is not the 27th of May. I don't know where they're getting this information, but let's see here. If you go June 5th, and there's 7 days in a week, so that's minus 21 days. That's 16 days in May, minus 31. You got 15 May, my friends. So on 15 May, Sirhan is writing in his diary that RFK must be assassinated by June 5th. Supposedly, because of a speech he made in support of Israel, okay? That's not dated 15 May, but 11 days later on the 26th of May. He's carrying this article from the 26th of May in his pocket when he is captured. Don't you think that's kind of odd? That you're writing in your diary that he's going to assassinate, Kennedy should be assassinated before the 5th of June. RFK may die, RFK may die, RFK may die. And supposedly, the reason is because Kennedy makes a speech supporting Israel should get 50 Phantoms, but not until the 26th. So you're writing that he must die on the 15th of May, and the government's reasoning is because Kennedy made this speech on the 26th of May, it doesn't match up. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work out. Okay? Do you not see the weirdness in this? I find it very interesting. Hold on one second. All right. So we're going to start reading from this book called RFK Must Die. And this is it right here by Robert Blair Kaiser. And that's pulled from a phrase written by, supposedly by Sirhan in his diary. So hopefully it has most of the pages here. And we'll go through this. Looks like it was written in 2008. And we'll take a look and see what we have here. Always faceless men. There has to be something more to it. Senator Ted Kennedy, 5 June 1968. Let's see, we'll blow this up a little bit. When yet another assassin's bullet took the life of yet another Kennedy, the whole world demanded to know who did it and why. They soon discovered who. It was a young Palestinian Arab refugee with a strange double name, Sirhan. But the story why he killed the one he propounded at the trial didn't make any sense. Just exactly why I thought it should make sense is part of history and part autobiography. I'm a Christian of particular thoughtful kind, a convert to Catholicism at the precious age of 13 who found comfort in a system of belief that told me who I was and why I was here and where I was going. I needed that lifeboat because my family's little bark had gone aground in the shipwreck called divorce. It wasn't the only symbolic waters of baptism that calmed my chaos. I soon found myself in a Jesuit prep school that brought me a sense of order borrowed from the centuries. The Welshung was enough and more than enough to get me through my teens. And then still trying to narrow down the full meaning of it all, I joined the Jesuits, who not only taught me who I was and where I was going, but also gave me a set of critical tools, mainly how to think and how to write, which is really only a way of consolidating our thoughts, but also how to look for the meaning of things. I thought my way right of the Jesuits, of course, because I couldn't live reasonably and humanely with a community of men who were then stiffening under their own rigid rules. And I didn't think my way out of the church itself. By the church, I don't mean the hierarchical Roman Catholic Church, which still suffers from my friend Michael Novak called non-historical orthodoxy, but rather from the People's Church as defined by the Fathers of Vatican II, which was marked by two things. One, a way of thinking and feeling oft identified by the words of my faith, which comes down to meaning a man for others, and two, citizenship in a community of loving persons who would be there for me were both fortune and misfortune, as they tend to strike most men and women who dare to dive into action and passion of our times. I found the action and passion I was looking for becoming I was going to say journalist. Red Smith, a mid-century nonsense sports columnist from the New York Times, once defined journalists as a reporter who needs a haircut. His caddy put down as some pretentious Brits he met at the Helsinki Olympics who were more interested in writing about the abstract meaning of record-breaking 1,500-meter run than they actually talking about the young record breaker to find out what made him run so fast. Okay, so I had a 3-year apprenticeship as a reporter on Arizona's largest newspaper, and then I became a serious Time magazine foreign correspondent, a step up from being a mere reporter, but nothing so pretentious as a journalist, except that I was working for a magazine that had its high-minded moments, and some writers whose reportage had a perspective and a context that came very close to the kind of history written by Thucydides or Gibbon or Theodore H. White. White started out as a freelance foreign correspondent in China for Time magazine and had published a book-length account of the John F. Kennedy Nixon presidential campaign that transcended anything I'd ever read about our political system. By employing political and sociological theory in his Making of a President 1960, White found meaning in the entirely contingent events of a political campaign. Whew, it's a lot of stuff there. All right, so let's stop there. That's kind of the intro. We'll get back into that. I'm running a little bit behind here. All right, let's see, and that is page, what is that? All right, hold on one second. All right, and this is just a general Robert Kennedy assassination Google search, and we're going to go through this and see if anything sticks out. So hold on one second. All right, so here's one from the Library of Congress. Looks like there's some sketches. Let's take a look at that one. Drawing Justice. Okay. Looks like these are just sketches here. Looks like this is of the trial. All right, so it's not much there. Okay, now this one says California Secretary of State Robert Kennedy Assassination Investigation Records. So maybe there's something here. Guide to the Los Angeles Department Records of Robert Kennedy Assassination. Let's take a look at that. A lot of these just go nowhere. This gives you an index. Card index, office files, arrest reports, broadcasts and teletypes, crime reports, rosters, evidence files, FBI indices. So it just goes on giving you a list of what they have. Reinvestigation files, Wilford board files. All right, so I'm going to stop there, and then we'll kind of get back to this now that I've got kind of the organization down, and we will figure out what we're going to do after that. All right, thank you.